This is something I'm particularly passionate about because it's deeply personal, I would say. I think that this is something that has been such a theme in even I's family life that I didn't realize necessarily wasn't such a big theme in other people's lives. So for us, pretty early on when we started having kids, we made the intentional decision to sit towards the front. Usually we try to sit in the first few pews. And we did that because we wanted our kids to participate in the mass. And we were sharing that with some of our friends the other. We were just mentioning we had one of our experiences that we've had many experiences of someone saying something to us about our kids. And we were just bringing that up and talking to them. And they're like, "Oh yeah, we've never had that." And so it was just a reality check for us. Like, this isn't something that everyone goes through, that everyone does. And so I wanted to share about that because I think it's something that we should challenge ourselves to do. I think you need to challenge yourself to sit with your kids at the front of Mass. If you have kids, especially young kids, I think you need to sit at the front. And I'm not the only one that has said this. A lot of priests say this. A lot of spiritual leaders say this, that engage the youth, engage your children, bring them to the Mass. And so there's several reasons that I think you should sit at the front. I think one, for their sakes, two, for other people's sakes, three, for Jesus's sakes, and four, just like looking at precedent, looking at history, looking at the type of church that was and we hope to have. So first and foremost, I think you need to sit at the front of the church because your kids need it. They can't see very far. Like there's a cry room for sure, but the cry room is usually always at the back and it has glass and that's nice, but really they don't have that type of vision until they're like 3 or 4 where they can fully actually see. And even at that, it's hard for a 4-year-old to concentrate looking at something that's 50 yards away. It's hard for us to concentrate looking at something that's far away. If we can't see it, we can't engage it. So when you bring your kids to Mass and you put them at the front of the church, they can actually see what's going on. They can see the priest. They can see what the altar servers are doing, washing hands, the little nuances of holding their hands over the Eucharist. What does that mean? Why do they wash their hands? Why do they put a little bit of water in the cup and not just the wine? And you'll begin to see, actually, if you sit at the front with your kids, they will start asking questions because they will be paying attention. And it's great. There's some churches near us that have little pamphlets in their pews that say, like, to parents with young children, please sit towards the front. Quietly explain the Mass to them because the Mass isn't for us. Well, it's not for me. How about that? And that's a misconception. I feel like we live in a culture, a day and age that everything is very individualistic, that we no longer have this idea of community. We have no longer this attachment to other people, especially people we have no idea who they are. And there's people at our church, which is relatively new. There's people at our church that we do not know. Like I guarantee you don't know everyone at your church, but there used to be the case that you knew everyone at your church, that we had parish communities. You lived, you worked, you prayed all together. You lived life together, but that's not it anymore. And I think that's created some shift in dynamic. But anyways, what I'm saying is Mass is not for the individual. Mass is not a personal devotion. It is a worship. We go to Mass to worship God. We don't go to Mass to be filled. We don't go to Mass for our own sakes to receive His grace and to have our sins forgiven. And it's not for us, it's for Him. Yes, those things are secondary causes or secondary effects, but ultimately, Mass is not for you. Mass is not for me. Mass is for all of us. It's a communal opportunity to come together, to offer our gifts, to be reconciled with each other, and to come to the Father and to say, thank you so much for your Son. We worship you. We do this in remembrance of you. I think that's the biggest hiccup that I have seen, is that there are people at church, and I believe this is a minority, but there are people at church that think that if anybody takes their attention off of Mass, it is wrong. That they are there and that they need to be able to pay attention the whole time. I'm not like blaming, like, oh, you should just have better attention span. You should be able to focus better. No, I'm saying that it's not what it's about. That we're here together. And as soon as it becomes me and God in this personal thing and not a communal thing, then you've totally lost the point of Mass. It's a communion. Like, why else would we have a part of the Mass that's the peace? Originally, the peace is not just like to say hi to your friends. It's actually like the scripture says, if you have something wrong with your brother, if there's some disagreement, go to him, settle it, and then go to the altar. That's how it's supposed to be. And that's why we have this communal sense. And so often, when our kids are making noises or not being perfectly quiet because they're 4, 1.5, they don't actually like, talk to any person that knows anything about child psychology. Like, they don't have impulse control actually until like way later. So, I mean, if you think a teenager struggles with impulse control, imagine how a 4-year-old does it. But there's this expectation that they have to be quiet. And they come to us, like I said, this has happened at every single church that we've ever gone to. So, like, not only just like your everyday neighborhood church that's like, it kind of stinks and has some things wrong with liturgically and the people, there's not reverence there. Even at some of the most reverent churches we've been to, there's still these people who are stuck in this idea that your kid is an inconvenience. And someone actually said that to once, and they said, I don't buy this modern notion that just because you have kids that everyone else has to tolerate them. It's like, what? That's literally what it's about. Like, it's literally about coming together and being together as a community in worship. And so it's good for them. It's good for your kids because they see what's going on. But it's good for other younger families because it's hard. It is really hard. I will not deny that. I am more adamant about sitting at the front than my wife, but my wife also agrees. Like, she wants to sit at the front, but it's hard. It's hard because in the back of your head, when your kid's making noise, it feels like everyone's staring at you. You look around, and if someone's giving you a neutral look, it's easy to be like, that neutral look is actually a negative look. You perceive things that aren't always the case. And we've had instances where we perceive someone is angry and they actually come up and they say something nice after us. But so it's good for other young families to be like, hey, if they're doing it, I can do it. And also, it's good to sit together because then you can actually be like, you can, one, help each other with your kids. You know, if someone needs to rock it or if you need to sit in their lap. I mean, our kids are notorious for like climbing into our friends' laps. And it helps because then they're kind of more paying attention because they're like, okay, I'm with Auntie Caitlin and I have to pay attention, or she's gonna give me back to Daddy. It's also the opportunity, like, if your kid is being loud, like, you have checks and balances. Like, your friend can be like, yeah, maybe we should take him out. Or you can like look and be like, what do you think? And they're like, yeah, maybe pop up to the cry room real quick or walk around the back real quick. So it emboldens other young families to do this as well. It's also really good actually for older people, not only people who still have kids, but people who don't have kids anymore. I feel like the people that come up to us the most and thank us the most for bringing our kids, one, just to Mass. Like, people thank us for coming to Mass. Like, yeah, I mean, you're welcome, I guess. Like, okay. That shows the community aspect. But a lot of times it's because like they're like, this gives us hope that there are young people who still care about the faith, that there are still children being raised up in the faith. And so these older families that maybe have kids that are teenagers now, they'll come up to us and say, thank you so much. I remember those times. It's so hard, but you're doing great. Keep doing it. Keep bringing them. It's worth it. And we'll also have like grandma and grandpa age people saying like, oh, this brings us so much joy to see young people again. You know, I have grandkids at home. I remember my kids were that age, and it brings them joy. And it's not a distraction. It shouldn't be a distraction. It is a distraction for some people, but that's their mindset. It's intrinsically, it's not really a distraction. It's just part of the community of the faithful. Like, I mean, think about it this way. Like, something that I've thought about, I'm not sure if I've ever actually said it to someone, but like, if you're going to come to me and say, hey, your kid's disruptive, you need to take him out of Mass. There's a level, and we'll get to that in a second, but if they're just like being a normal kid who makes noises sometimes, who doesn't know how to be quiet all the time, would you say the same to someone who has autism? Like, would you say the same thing to an adult who has some struggles with constraining their behavior or being quiet? Like, as soon as we start putting this gradation to, like, you can only be in Mass if you know how to be quiet, it's similar to like putting a gradation on, you know, who's worth saving in the womb and who's not worth saving in the womb. Like, all people intrinsically are good and all people intrinsically should be at Mass. And so just because our kids sometimes aren't quiet, doesn't mean they shouldn't be there. And that's the third group that it's good for, is the people that are just calloused. The people that forgot what it's like to have young kids, or the people that just think that Mass is just for themselves. I think we live in a culture that is pretty anti-children, even amongst Christian, Catholic. I think that we live in a culture that's not very hospitable to young families, hospitable to young children. And I don't know why exactly. I mean, there's a lot of cultural things, there's lots of nuances that go into that, but I do pretty confidently believe that we live in a culture that's anti. Even if people don't know it, even if people won't say it, children are seen as inconvenient. Children are seen as just like a struggle, but they are a gift. And so exposing people to this and saying this should be normal, and I'm going to stand up for this, because ultimately a quiet church is a dead church. Like, if there is no kids at church, then who's going to be at church in 20 years? Nobody. Like, no one's going to be at church if not, they're not going to magically want to come to church when they're 20. And I think this used to be, before there was cry rooms, I think people would just not bring their kids to church until they were older. But I don't think that's been fruitful. I mean, look at the church. I don't think that was a good practice. So we need to expose, and we need to change the culture from the inside. And we do that by being trailblazers, being front runners, and saying, no, like, my kids, I want them to be exposed to the Mass. I want them to know what it's like to worship Jesus. Another reason I think it's important to sit towards the front is that it creates a precedence of what Mass is for and what it's about. I think it's easy if you sit in the back, you sit in the cry room, your kids can play, they can be distracted, they can kind of do your own thing, and you can pay attention more, and you can listen more, and it might be less stressful for you. But now they believe that Mass is a place to play, Mass is another place to just hang out, to read books, to have snacks. Mass isn't a place to pay attention, to engage, to participate. And so that's what they're going to grow up. They're going to grow with the precedence that, like, I come to Mass and I just do what I always do, just quietly. And sometimes not so quietly if you're in the cry room. And so when they get older, that's what they're going to think. They're not going to want to engage. They're not going to participate. Vocations used to be really tied with, like, altar servers and people actively participating in the church because they'd be exposed to it and they wouldn't be part of it. But if your kid's never exposed to it or close to it, they're not going to want to participate. But if they're at the front of Mass watching the other boys that are a few years older than them doing stuff at the altar with the priest, they think that's cool. They're going to want to do that. If your daughter sees other women reading from the book, they're going to want to go do that. They're going to want to do what they see other people doing that are their age or slightly older. But if they're in the back, they're not going to see that. They're not going to engage. Another thing is that when you just hang out in the cry room, it doesn't set the precedent of Mass is important to you. So that's something that I try to do whenever our kids are loud, and there's a time and a place. If they're loud, if they're just screaming, if they're breaking down, take them out for sure. But I don't go out there for long, and I usually try not to sit down in the cry room and just let them play. I usually just hold them, if possible, at the back of the church, not even outside of the church. I want to keep them in the church because I want them to know that you can't just leave whenever you want. We're here. This is important. This is special. And also, Daddy wants to be here. Like, I want to be here. This is important to me. And so I'm not going to just leave because I want to be here. And so you have to be here too. And hopefully this idea of, like, okay, we're not going to, I can't just leave even if I throw a fit or even if I want to. It'll hopefully create this idea that, like, okay, I'm here. I'm going to invest. I had a friend who's a Jesuit in formation. He talked about when he was in high school, he had to go to Mass every single week at his school. And he said they would always mess around. And one time he's like, I'm just going to, like, I'm just going to try to pay attention and see what that's like. It was like, I don't know, his weird way of revolting is like, I'm going to pay attention to Mass. And he found that he paid attention to Mass and he began to actually find it engaging and he enjoyed it. And after a while, he was wanting to participate in the Mass. And so I think this idea of, like, okay, if your kid knows they have to be here, they have to pay attention, then they may learn to enjoy it. They may learn to love it. It takes a while. It's like a muscle. Like, I mean, for me, like, I want to read more, but I don't always enjoy it. But I sit down and I force myself to read, and I find myself to enjoy it after I practice. Same with exercising, eating in certain ways. It's a habit. It takes time. And so we need to form in our kids the habit that Mass is a place we stay. It's important. It's special. We engage. We participate. And hopefully that will cultivate a desire that eventually they just want to do those things. Personally, it's hard for me to argue with Jesus and when he says, bring the children to me. Like, when the children were making noise and creating a ruckus, his disciples were like, shh, 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 keep it down, no, no, no. And Jesus said, bring them to me. Like, I want them. Like, Jesus wants your children. And your children want to be wanted. Imagine what it's like if the whole Mass, you're just saying, shh, shh, quiet. Don't say that. Shh, quiet. Sit down. Sit still. Like, that's not receiving love. That's saying, you're doing something wrong. You're bad. You're wrong. Quiet. Don't talk. We don't want to hear you. We don't want to see you. That doesn't sound like a loving father. That doesn't sound like someone I want to have a relationship with. So we need to encourage love and cultivate this like desire to just have children be where they're at. And yes, teach them to be quiet, but a lot of this stuff needs to be done outside of Mass, not inside of Mass. And cultivate that. But at the end of the day, love them for where they're at. Like, understand child psychology and not just like have these expectations that my kid needs to be quiet and pay attention because Mass is important. It is important. But Jesus loves your children. And think about it. I mean, imagine the church of the Acts of the Apostles. Like, imagine the early church. Do you think they had cry rooms? Like, whole families were being baptized. People were falling out of windows. They obviously had atypical church architecture, atypical church environment. There was for sure kids crying. There was for sure probably kids running around. There was women breastfeeding. There's a bunch of stuff happening. Absolutely. But they were there together in community breaking bread. Because it wasn't about just them. It was about the faithful. It was about the communion of saints. I really want you to try it. If you have friends that you go to church with, invite them because it'll make it easier. But try it. Sit at the front of Mass, you know? If you don't feel comfortable doing the first pew, second pew, third pew, whatever. But I think there is something to say about sitting in the first pew because you really can't see people's reactions. If you're in the first pew, you can't see what people look like. If you just look forward, don't look back, you don't know if people are mean mugging you. And just see how it goes. It's probably going to be rough. It's probably going to be hard. It's going to be nerve-wracking. But hopefully, eventually, it becomes a habit. And your kids start engaging, asking questions, learning more. Because ultimately, you desire this relationship for them. And they're not going to get this relationship sitting at the back. They're not going to get this relationship sitting in the cry room. They need to be part of Mass. They need to see what's happening. They need to learn visually. So do it. Have your kids sit at the front of the Mass. The worst that's going to happen is someone's going to say something to you. Your wife's going to cry. Hey, but it's happened to us like 15, 20 times. And we're okay. It sucks, but we're okay. So do it. Sit at the front of Mass. Teach your kids about Jesus by letting them see what's happening.